Well, it was certainly necessary to provide some money to the financial system at that point, although it could have been done in a very different way than it was. Many people have been very critical of both the Bush administration's and the Obama administration's failure to do something more substantial with regard to the foreclosure problem and the burden now faced by many people whose mortgages are so-called underwater, where they owe more money now than the current value of their home. There have been many proposals about how to do that, including, in some cases, giving people money directly, and there have been other proposals for people who have to lose their homes that they can be converted into a rent-to-own program, which is probably the most promising proposal that I've heard. And unfortunately, neither the Bush administration nor the Obama administration have done anything substantial about this problem. It's very distressing. The question is whether Lehman was perhaps allowed to fail because it was a competitor to Goldman Sachs. People have discussed and considered many possible explanations for why Lehman Brothers was allowed to fail. I don't know, I can't get inside Henry Paulson's head, and of course he declined to be interviewed, as did Ed Bernanke. I suspect, without really knowing, I suspect that several factors were at play, and that it was a case where several different forces pointed in the same direction. And one of them was indeed the fact that Lehman, over the previous decade, had emerged as a significant competitor to Goldman. Another is that, with one exception, there was one person in Lehman's senior management who was a cousin of George W. Bush. With that sole exception, the top management of Lehman was composed of Democrats, not Republicans, who had contributed heavily to Democratic campaigns. A third possible factor that many people have discussed is that a lot of people just hate Dick Fuld. He was known as a very unpleasant man, and he had a bad relationship with many people, and he had gotten extremely arrogant and disconnected. And a fourth was that, in fact, Lehman was not impossible to save, but would have been more expensive to save than Bear Stearns. So some combination of those factors, and people have even mentioned other factors beyond that. I don't, for example, totally discount the moral hazard argument that they wanted to make an example of somebody so that people would get worried about. I don't totally discount that. But unfortunately, the one explanation that you can totally discount is the explanation that they publicly offered, which was that it was not legally possible to save Lehman Brothers. That is definitely not true, and in fact, a couple of former administration officials have quietly admitted that in public. The question was about American indebtedness to China, in part as a result of the crisis. First, just a technical thing, it's not the Federal Reserve, but the Treasury Department and the United States government that borrow in that way. But you're absolutely right that the United States government now owes a great deal of money to China, which, in some ways is a communist country, but in other ways behaves like a very capitalist one. So far, the Chinese have not, at least that we can see, have not attempted to use that leverage, but the leverage is certainly there. On the other hand, China needs the United States as a market, and so I think the two countries need each other. So I don't think that the fact that a lot of the money is owed to China as such is very distressing, but what is very distressing is the fact that the national debt of the United States got doubled as a result of this crisis, and the American people are going to be paying for this for a very long time to come. Well, I asked and they agreed. Now, I didn't give them a list of all the questions that I was going to be asking them, including, very embarrassing questions about their personal financial conflicts of interest and the stupidest things that they'd ever written. But nor did I say that I was, going to be this incredibly sycophantic, unthreatening guy. I just said, I'm making a documentary about the financial crisis. We'd like to interview you. Can we do so? I think that as to why they agreed, I think that in many cases, it was that they had grown quite arrogant, in part because they had never previously been challenged. It was very clear during the interviews that they were stunned that somebody was actually challenging them and actually forcing them to respond and calling them when they were, how vulgar shall we get, spewing forth organic matter